Welcome back to Living in the Word, and today we are looking at the story of Moses and Pharaoh, part 2. So let's begin. Exodus 6, verses 28 to 30. And so it was on a certain day, Yahweh spoke to Moses in the land of Egypt. And Yahweh spoke to Moses, saying, I am Yahweh. Speak to Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, all that I am speaking to you. And Moses said before Yahweh, Look, I am a poor speaker, and how will Pharaoh listen to me? Exodus 7 verses 1 to 7. And Yahweh said to Moses, See, I have made you as a god to Pharaoh, and Aaron your brother will be your prophet. You will speak all that I will command you, and Aaron your brother will speak to Pharaoh, and he will release the Israelites from his land. And I myself will harden the heart of Pharaoh, and I will make my signs and my wonders numerous in the land of Egypt. And Pharaoh will not listen to you, and I will put my hand into Egypt and bring out my divisions, my people, the Israelites from the land of Egypt with great punishments. And the Egyptians will know that I am Yahweh when I stretch out my hand over Egypt and bring the Israelites out from their midst. And Moses and Aaron did it as Yahweh commanded them, so they did. And Moses was 80 years old, and Aaron was 83 years old when they spoke to Pharaoh. God now details his plan to Moses and Aaron about hardening Pharaoh's heart so that he can perform signs and wonders in the land. Moses was 80 years old and Aaron was 83 when they spoke to Pharaoh. This means Moses had been in Midian for about 40 years. What I find fascinating about this whole story of Moses is that he is not very good at public speaking, but God uses you in your weaknesses so that he gets the glory for what has happened. If he used people in their strengths, it's quite possible that those people will say, well, because I'm good at this, in Moses, because I'm good at public speaking, that made Pharaoh release the Israelites out of Egypt and not give any glory to God. That's why God uses us in our weaknesses, not our strengths. Exodus 7, verses 8 to 13. And Yahweh said to Moses and to Aaron, saying, When Pharaoh speaks to you, saying, Do a wonder for yourselves, you will say to Aaron, Take your staff and throw it before Pharaoh, and it will become a snake. And Moses and Aaron came to Pharaoh, and they did so, as Yahweh had commanded. And Aaron threw his staff before Pharaoh and before his servants, and it became a snake. And Pharaoh also called the wise men and the sorcerers, and they also, the magicians of Egypt, did likewise with their secret arts. Each threw down his staff, and they became snakes. And Aaron's staff swallowed up their staffs, and Pharaoh's heart was hard, and he did not listen to them, as Yahweh had said. Aaron demonstrates God's power by throwing his rod down and turning into a snake. Pharaoh calls his sorcerers, and they do the same. But Aaron's snake swallows up the Egyptians' snakes. So this demonstrates the supremacy of God's power over any magician. Pharaoh's stubbornness and arrogance shows in refusing to let the Israelites go. Now, interestingly, the Hebrew word for serpent or snake used in this verse is different than the previous times. Nakash is the Hebrew word for serpent or snake, and this is a word used when Moses was in front of the burning bush. So in this text, the Hebrew word is tanin, which means sea monster. In the modern Hebrew, the word actually means crocodile. Now, this doesn't mean that it was a crocodile in this text, but in Egypt, the god of the Nile, Sobek, was a crocodile. The tale is that Sobek laid his eggs on the banks of the Nile, starting the creation process. Sobek was a god of power, protection, and fertility. How ironic would it be if the crocodile of Aaron swallowed up the crocodiles of the Egyptians? Let's keep going. Exodus 7, verses 14 to 25. And Yahweh said to Moses, Pharaoh's heart is insensitive. He refuses to release the people. Go to Pharaoh in the morning. Look, he is going out to the water, and you must wait to meet him on the bank of the Nile. And you must take in your hand the staff that was changed into a snake. And you must say to him, Yahweh, the God of the Hebrews, has sent me to you, saying, Release my people, that they may serve me in the desert. And look, you have not listened until now. Thus says Yahweh, by this you will know that I am Yahweh. Look, I am about to strike with the staff that is in my hand the water that is in the Nile, and it will be changed to blood. And the fish that are in the Nile will die, and the Nile will stink, and the Egyptians will be unable to drink water from the Nile. And Yahweh said to Moses, Say to Aaron, Take your staff and stretch your hand out over the waters of Egypt and over their rivers, over their canals and over their pools, and over all of their reservoirs of water, so that they may become blood. And blood will be in all the land of Egypt, and in vessels of wood and of stone. And Moses and Aaron did so, as Yahweh had commanded, and he raised the staff and struck the water that was in the Nile before the eyes of Pharaoh and before the eyes of his servants. And all of the water that was in the Nile was changed to blood. And the fish that were in the Nile died, and the Nile stank, and the Egyptians were not able to drink water from the Nile, and the blood was in all the land of Egypt. And the magicians of Egypt did likewise with their secret arts, and Pharaoh's heart was hard, and he did not listen to them as Yahweh had spoken. And Pharaoh turned and went to his house, and this also he did not take to heart. And all of the Egyptians dug around the Nile for water to drink, because they were unable to drink from the water of the Nile. And 7 days passed after Yahweh struck the Nile. God now commands Moses and Aaron to strike the Nile River with the rod, turning all the water in Egypt into blood. Can you imagine the smell, the stench in the land, all the dead fish rising to the top of the waters? The sorcerers of Pharaoh were able to copy God's doing. So again, Pharaoh's heart turned hard. I'm not really sure how they were able to copy what God had done, because already all the water in Egypt had turned into blood. But the waters remained this way for 7 days. These plagues were also designed to show the Egyptians that their gods were non-existent. This first plague was against Num, the guardian of the river, and Hapi, the spirit of the Nile, and Osiris, whose blood was the Nile River. Exodus 8, verses 1 to 15. And Yahweh said to Moses, Go to Pharaoh and say to him, Thus says Yahweh, Release my people so that they may serve me. And if you are refusing to release, look, I am going to plague all of your territory with frogs, and the Nile will swarm with frogs, and they will go up and come into your house and into your bedroom and onto your bed and into the house of your servants and among your people and into your ovens and into your kneading troughs, and the frogs will go up against you and against your people and against all of your servants. And Yahweh said to Moses, Say to Aaron, Stretch out your hand with your staff over the rivers, over the canals and over the pools, and bring up the frogs on the land of Egypt. And Aaron stretched out his hand over the waters of Egypt, and the frogs went up and covered the land of Egypt. And the magicians did likewise with their secret arts, and they brought up frogs over the land of Egypt. And Pharaoh called Moses and Aaron and said, Pray to Yahweh, and let him remove the frogs from me and from my people, and let me release the people so that they can sacrifice to Yahweh. And Moses said to Pharaoh, I leave to you the honor over me. When shall I pray for you and for your servants and for your people to cut off the frogs from you and from your houses? They will be left only in the Nile. And he said, Tomorrow. And he said, Let it be according to your word, so that you will know that there is no one like Yahweh, our God. And the frogs will depart from you and from your house and from your servants. They will be left only in the Nile. And Moses and Aaron went out from Pharaoh, and Moses cried out to Yahweh over the matter of the frogs that he had brought on Pharaoh. And Yahweh did according to the word of Moses, and the frogs died from the houses, from the courtyards, and from the fields, and they piled them in countless heaps, and the land stank. And Pharaoh saw that there was relief, and he made his heart insensitive or hard, and he did not listen to them as Yahweh had spoken. God now commands Moses and Aaron to stretch out their hand over all the waterways and bring forth frogs. The sorcerers of Pharaoh were able to copy God, but this time Pharaoh pleads with Moses and Aaron. Once God takes the frogs away, Pharaoh hardened his heart again. Again, the stink in the land, and for them to be able to pile all those frogs into heaps, there must have been so many frogs. And it like it said, stank the land again. Now this second plague was against the Egyptian gods Hapi and Heket, who were symbolized by frogs and were related to fertility rites. Let's keep reading. Exodus 8 verses 16 to 19. And Yahweh said to Moses, say to Aaron, stretch out your staff and strike the dust of the land, and it will become gnats in all the land of Egypt. And he did so, and Aaron stretched out his hand with his staff, and he struck the dust of the land, and it became gnats on the humans and on the animals. All of the dust of the land became gnats in all the land of Egypt. And the magicians did so with their secret arts to bring out the gnats, but they were not able. And the gnats were on the humans and on the animals. And the magicians said to Pharaoh, it is the finger of God. But the heart of Pharaoh was hard, and he did not listen to them, as Yahweh had spoken. God now commands Moses and Aaron to strike the dust with the rod to bring forth gnats or lice. The sorcerers of Pharaoh tried to copy God, but were unable to do so this time. And they recognized this as the act of the Hebrew God, but Pharaoh refuses to listen. Now this third plague was against god Seb, the god of the earth. Exodus 8 verses 20 to 32. And Yahweh said to Moses, start early in the morning and stand before Pharaoh. Look, he is going out to the water, and you must say to him, thus says Yahweh, release my people so that they may serve me. But if you are not about to release my people, look, I am about to send out flies among you, and among your servants, and among your people, and in your houses. And the houses of Egypt will fill up with the flies, and also the ground that they are on. But on that day I will distinguish the land of Goshen, where my people are staying, but by there not being flies there, so that you will know that I am Yahweh in the midst of the land, and I will put a distinction between my people and your people. This sign will be tomorrow. And Yahweh did so, and a severe swarm of flies came to the house of Pharaoh and the house of his servants, and in all the land of Egypt the land was ruined because of the flies. And Pharaoh called Moses and Aaron, and he said, go, sacrifice to your God in the land. And Moses said, to do so is not right, because we will sacrifice to Yahweh our God a thing detestable to the Egyptians. Look, if we sacrifice before their eyes the thing detestable to the Egyptians, will they not stone us? We will go a journey of 3 days into the desert, and we will sacrifice to Yahweh our God according to what he says to us. And Pharaoh said, I myself will release you, and you will sacrifice to Yahweh your God in the desert. Only surely you must not go far. Pray for me. And Moses said, look, I am going out from you, and I will pray to Yahweh so that the flies depart from Pharaoh, from his servants and from his people tomorrow. Only let not Pharaoh again deceive us by not releasing the people to sacrifice to Yahweh. And Moses went out from Pharaoh and prayed to Yahweh, and Yahweh did according to the word of Moses, and removed the flies from Pharaoh, from his servants and from his people. Not one was left. And Pharaoh made his heart insensitive also this time, and he did not release the people. This time God sends flies upon Egypt. And interestingly, this is the first time that the land of Goshen, where the Israelites were living, is mentioned as being set apart from the plagues. There could be two meanings here. Now, firstly, the previous plagues included the land that the Israelites lived in, or secondly, Goshen was spared from the previous plagues, but it would be highly unusual for the flies to not enter the land of Goshen. So to make Pharaoh aware of this would strengthen the plague as being from God and not some natural occurrence. In my opinion, the Israelites did go through the plagues of blood, frogs and lice, but were spared from the plague of flies. Continuing on, Pharaoh again pleads with Moses and Aaron to intercede, but afterwards changes his mind. Now this fourth plague was against the god Watchet, the god of flies. Well, I really enjoyed studying the story of the Bible, and I hope you enjoyed it as well. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for the next video. God bless.